Hello everyone, and welcome to Wonders Weird and Wild. Today's topic will be what is referred to as the deep biosphere, or the biosphere that exists below the surface of the Earth. As always, if you have any topics that you would like to suggest for future videos, please drop them in the comments. And without any further ado, let's get on with today's topic. So, most people, when they imagine the term biosphere, imagine what we usually see life, and where we usually see life. Trees popping up out of the ground, animals scurrying about, fish swimming around in lakes and ponds in the oceans, and that kind of thing. What many people don't realize, though, is that life can exist pretty much anywhere where there are organic molecules, or at least the components that are used to create organic molecules. And this includes, in a very, very large part, beneath the surface of the Earth, in the Earth's crust. So large of a part, in fact, that it is estimated that around 90% of all of Earth's microbes exist below the surface of the ground. But what actually happens in an ecosystem where everything exists below the ground, without sunlight, without anything that we would normally consider able to drive ecosystems? And that's what we're going to be covering in part today. So I like to split the deep biosphere up into two different categories, which I refer to as the deep and the very deep. We're going to start with the deep because that one is the simpler of the two, generally speaking. This includes everything that you'll find up to a few meters down. Its life is diverse and incredibly widespread. This is where you'll find most of the multicellular life in the deep biosphere. It's composed of organisms such as fungi. It is also composed of all the different phylum of worms that we currently know to exist, being roundworms, flatworms, and annelid worms. And then, of course, we have one of the broadest invertebrate categories, the arthropods, being your insects and such. And you'll find all of these guys hanging out just a couple feet below the ground. Most of these multicellular organisms that are within the deep biosphere feed on either decaying matter from organisms that live above the surface, or they feed on the actual organisms that lay above the surface, commuting, so to speak, to the surface to get food to then come back. We actually get a very, very interesting habitat for detritivores and for decomposers that exist on the ocean floor. What you get on the ocean floor is, from all of the activities of the organisms up above in the water, you get what is referred to as almost a snowfall of organic material coming from above, which is exactly what it looks like, and this collects in a deep layer on the floor of the ocean. And this marine snow can go up to 20 feet in depth, and it serves as an immense food source for all sorts of little tiny critters that find their way into there, and it serves as a home for them as well. Then in this area we also find a ton of microbial life. Now these microbes are largely aerobic, though there are anaerobic ones. When I say aerobic, I mean organisms that produce energy using oxygen. Because these microbes have ready access to oxygen where they use it. There are other microbes, though, that don't use oxygen in the same way, and instead use other chemical reactions to fuel their metabolisms. In the process of nitrogen fixation, for example, nitrogen-fixing bacteria take atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into nitrogen forms that can be used by actual organisms on the surface of the Earth. And this helps drive the nitrogen cycle, which, if you're unfamiliar, the nitrogen cycle is one of the main things that allows us to actually exist as human beings. Nitrogen is one of the main nutrients. Now, these nitrogen-fixing bacteria exist in the roots of these plants, or around the roots of these plants, which allows for these nitrogen compounds to be absorbed by the plants so that they can live and exist. Another way that microbes on the shallower end of the scale of things here are able to obtain energy for what they need is a process called chemosynthesis, which is similar to photosynthesis, except it doesn't use sunlight, it just uses energy from chemical reactions inside of the organism from things that they've intaken. Now, chemosynthesis as a process is very common in bacteria that hang around hydrothermal vents and volcanic areas. Basically, they're sucking up primordial soup, which is just full of organic compounds that allows them to produce energy. A very common chemosynthesis reaction is carbon dioxide, water, hydrogen sulfide, and oxygen combining to create glucose, water, and sulfur. Now we are going to dive to the very deep. And this is where you start to find all of your extremophiles, all of your organisms that are capable of surviving in the most extreme of environments because they have adaptations that allow them to do so. Now, why do I say that these organisms are extremophiles? Well, most of the organisms that exist in the very deep area of the biosphere are microbial. They're largely bacteria and archaea. These organisms can exist up to 6 miles below the continent or 13 miles below the ocean floor. They have to survive in temperatures past 120 degrees Celsius or 248 degrees Fahrenheit. And on top of all of that, they have almost no nutrients or organic material on which they can feed off of in most cases, which causes them to slow their metabolic rate phenomenally, up to 1,000,000 times slower than ours, causing individual cells to live for up to 1,000 years. Just for reference, this is not a universal rule, but most cells within the human body renew at least every 10 years. So an individual cell living for thousands of years is beyond incredible. Now, these little guys pretty much chew on whatever they can possibly get their hands on. Specifically, that always falls down to two categories of molecules, being electron donors and electron receptors. If you don't know what electron donors and electron receptors are, I don't have the time to explain that in this video, but I encourage you to go look that up, and maybe at some point I'll make a video on it as well. Anyhow, electron donors include a few different types of molecules, like methane, hydrogen, reduced sulfur compounds, that kind of thing. While electron receptors include all of your nice nitrates and nitrites. And basically what these two do is they exchange electrons, allows for these organisms to produce energy and survive down 13 miles below the surface of the Earth. Because we haven't commonly dug this far into the Earth, because once you get around that depth, rock starts turning to plastic and our drill bits start melting and nasty things start happening to our equipment that make it difficult for us to dig that far. We don't have that great of a frame of reference for the entirety of the ecosystems that lay down there. We don't know that much about them because we haven't been there enough. Because of this, estimates say that there could be thousands more species down there that we don't actually know about and that we have never discovered because we don't know anything about what's actually down there. Hopefully in future years we can learn more about this because this is a really fascinating subject. Anyhow, thank you all for listening. As always, if you have any topics you would like to suggest for future videos, please drop them in the comments, and have a nice day.